My name is Emma. I'm in my 40s and currently working as a freelance writer from home. I married my husband, Benjamin, when we were both in our 20s, and I was working for a publishing company at that time. I wasn't a writer then, but rather what you would call an editor. Nevertheless, I was good at writing and constructing sentences from a young age, and by the latter half of my 20s, my annual income was close to $40,000. I would say my income was high for people around my age. On the other hand, my husband has been in the construction industry ever since he graduated from high school at 18. The men in his family line were all involved in the construction business, so following that trend, he went to a technical high school and took a job in construction. I don't know exactly what the current construction industry is like, but back when we were young, especially, the company where my husband worked forced the workers into very harsh working conditions. Constant unpaid overtime was a given, and it was normal to get paid less than $100 a day. There were no bonuses basically, and no social insurance either. Although my husband was making just under $30,000 after tax, we still had to pay for the health insurance and pension and such, so his net income was significantly lower than mine. He probably didn't like that. He's been always a little bit too proud of himself. We met when we were in grade 8 and ended up in the same class. From there, we started dating and got married after I graduated from college. Since we had been together for so long, I couldn't imagine being with anyone else, so I decided to overlook the small things, such as him being too proud of himself, not helping with houseworks, and not having an interest in pregnancy and childbirth. As long as I was patient, we had a harmonious household, so I stuck with it. However, when we reached our 30s, his income hadn't increased much, but mine had surpassed $50,000. That triggered him to explode with dissatisfaction, and he started to take it out on me and our children. Moreover, my husband was a national health insurance enrollee, so he didn't have the concept of dependence. So I had our children on my health insurance, but it seems that was also one of his complaints. He would always say, "I'm on national health insurance, so the kids should be too. It's normal for kids to be under their father's insurance in society, right? If they're under your insurance, won't the people at your company look down on me?" He cared only about his public image and said such things. It doesn't matter whose insurance the kids are under, and I think it's financially better to have them under social insurance than under national health insurance. Also, my husband was the type to squander all his pocket money on pachinko and horse racing, so I couldn't trust him with managing money. So, even when he said such things, I just went yeah, and brushed off. Then, several years passed with my husband's dissatisfaction lingering, and we reached our late 40s. Since I gave birth to our eldest daughter when I was 24, she was already an adult and had moved out. We still have kids in college and high school, so parenting itself is not over. But when our youngest became a high school student and became less dependent, I started a business. Leveraging my experience working as an editor for a publishing company, I decided to focus on working as a writer. Of course, while being a writer, I'm also taking on editing jobs as a freelancer. However, initially, due to the purchase of a new computer and software and client meetings, I wasn't making any money, and for the first time, my annual income dropped below my husband's. When he found out about this, his long-standing dissatisfaction exploded, and he suddenly started harassing me. "You were so confident about starting a business, but you're not making any money, are you? We're a married couple. We don't need to compete with each other over income, and I don't remember ever trying to one-up my husband in terms of income." However, my husband's own belief that men should earn more finally became a reality, and this turned him into a braggart. Eventually, he started saying that not being able to make money was due to my lack of ability. Were you flirting with the president of your company to get money or something? If you have the skills, you could easily earn $100,000 right away, right? LOL. You started a business, but you are only making a little over $20,000 a year, and that's funny. My husband laughed at me. He probably doesn't understand what starting a business really means, and that's why he says things like that. I was angry at him because he was nitpicking when he hadn't even tried it himself, but talking back wouldn't achieve anything. I started to ignore my husband's words. But since then, my husband's enthusiasm for his work has increased. He's making more money than me. No, he's under the illusion that he's more capable because I've fallen, and he voluntarily goes to work even on his days off. The situation is quite tough now, so he seems to be getting his overtime and holiday pay properly. I'm not sure about the truth, as my husband stubbornly refuses to show me his pay slip. But if he's satisfied with his current environment and working, that's fine. To put it positively, my husband is a workaholic. He had absolutely no interest in matters in the house or the kids, but he always worked hard without taking a day off, and he even went to work on his day off if there was an urgent work, even if he complained. Well, if he's being taken advantage of by his boss, that's another story. Anyway, because he has been too proud of himself and he is a workaholic, he's been spending less and less time at home lately. One day, I received a message from my daughter who had moved out. Apparently, she has someone who she wants to introduce, in other words, her boyfriend. I thought, finally, my daughter has reached that point too. But since I got married when I was 22, I didn't think much of it. I did report it to my husband, but, huh? Really? Well, if I'm not working, I can show up. Since he responded so casually, I decided not to expect much. Because my daughter knew that her father wasn't very interested in them even when I said, "Your father might not be able to make it," she responded calmly, "Yeah, I thought so." Then, 2 weeks after my daughter's message, she came home for the first time in a while. "Mom, I'm home. This is my fiancé." The fiancé, who she introduced, greeted politely and handed me a baked sweet that he had prepared. It was from a pastry shop that I've loved since long ago. I could feel my daughter's and her fiancé's sincerity. When my daughter glanced down the hallway, I looked in the same direction. There was my husband, dressed in his usual work clothes, peeking his head out. "I have to work today, so I'm leaving." He said just that, didn't make eye contact with her fiancé, and left. Even at times like this, his work probably matters more than our daughter's marriage to my husband. Urgent work? That's definitely weird. When did Dad become like that? I wondered why my daughter would say such a thing, but after hearing her fiancé's story, I understood. At the same time, my distrust of my husband began to grow. Then my daughter murmured, "Well, I don't really care about Dad. It's always been Mom who took me to places. Dad was always all about work. He's the kind of person who didn't care about his family because of work." Seeing my daughter looking sullen, I felt guilty. I pushed my mistrust of my husband to the back of my mind for a moment. "I'm sorry for making you feel lonely." As I gently hugged my daughter, who was holding back tears, she shed large tears like a burst dam. After all, no matter how morally abusive and scummy my husband is, he's their only father to my children. Even though the children think of him in this way, the person himself tramples on their feelings without a care. I sighed. "Please, take good care of my daughter," I said to my daughter's fiancé. Sometime later, they got married. The wedding ceremony is scheduled to take place in the spring of next year, which is also the season in which my daughter was born. I received an invitation, of course, and one also arrived for my husband, who is technically a parent. Since it's in both of our names, I naturally thought we would both attend, but my husband didn't seem too enthused for some reason. Is the wedding on a Saturday? I might have work that day. It's still several months away, so what is he talking about? I wondered, but I didn't want to start a fight over my daughter's wedding, so I didn't say anything. He is willing to attend, at least. Then, in a blink of an eye, the months flew by and it was the day of the wedding. I was at the hair salon getting my hair set, and I called my husband. I'm on my way now, where are you? He said he was also at the hair salon. We had originally agreed to go separately by taxi and meet at the venue, so I hung up the phone and immediately headed to the wedding venue by taxi. But no matter how long I waited, my husband didn't show up. The wedding was scheduled for 12 o'clock and it was past 11 now. Relatives were gradually arriving in the waiting room. An uneasy air began to fill the room because the father of the bride had yet to arrive, so I called my husband again. Hey, the ceremony starts at 12, you know that, right? He didn't answer the phone, so I left a voicemail, and I also sent a message. I kept calling every few minutes, but there was no sign of him answering. Finally, after I persistently called him, my husband answered. What is it? You're so persistent. His voice over the phone was clearly displeased. But right now, that didn't matter. Did you get my voicemail? The ceremony is about to start. You need to get here quickly or you'll be late. As I was hurriedly saying that, my husband cut me off and said something like this as if it were a matter of course. I have to go to work now. Suddenly, my boss called me. Seriously, don't call me just for a wedding. My hourly wage is high, can you afford it? I was at a loss for words at what he had said. With a flippant attitude, my husband continued, Anyway, the daughter is getting married, so she's not family or anything anymore. I have no obligation to attend a daughter's wedding. He made such an outrageous statement. Despite the fact that this is probably the highlight of her life, he said he wouldn't attend the ceremony because she's not our family anymore. I felt a surge of anger at the fact that such a father really existed, and at the same time, that this man was my husband. In the end, my husband hung up the phone without listening to a word I said. In the silent waiting room, even though I didn't put him on speaker, my husband's voice had leaked out, and my husband's parents, in other words, my in-laws, were furious. Then my father-in-law immediately called my husband from his phone and started yelling. My father-in-law hung up the phone after he scolded his son, so I asked him what was happening. He said that my husband was on his way. But the atmosphere now was the worst. The conversation had been overheard by my daughter's husband and his parents, and their relatives were visibly angry at my husband. I am so sorry about my husband. I didn't care about my appearance, and I sincerely apologized to them. Then, the in-laws patted my shoulder and shook their heads. It's not your fault, Emma. Our stupid son is making his wife apologize to people like this. Apologize like this. As I timidly raised my face, I realized that everyone was angry at my husband, and not at me. A married couple is two as one. So, I thought I, as his wife, should take responsibility for my husband. But no one in this place blamed me or my in-laws. Everyone must have recognized that my husband was being selfish and causing everyone trouble. Once again, I felt that I was blessed with relationships beyond my immediate family. And just before the ceremony, my husband arrived. I was waiting at the entrance for my husband. As soon as he arrived, he grabbed my collar and said, "Hey, why did you tell everyone? I said I was working." The moment I thought he was still trying to stick to his lie, I found myself unintentionally grinning. "Ha, work! Don't you really know who your daughter is getting married to?" When I said that, my husband said he didn't know. I guess that makes sense. He was going out lying about work without even greeting our daughter's fiancé properly. When I said that to him, my husband started shouting and throwing a fit, insisting it wasn't a lie. However, the situation changed drastically with the appearance of a certain person. "I have never asked you to work overtime or on your days off, have I?" "Huh? Jim?" Suddenly, the president of his company appeared, and my husband was clearly flustered. Actually, the father of my daughter's husband is the president of my husband's company. In other words, he is the son of the president of my husband's company. Jim took over his company from his predecessor, an uncle, and became a president 2 years ago. Apparently, the company had terrible working conditions when his uncle owned, but since the current president took over, he has eliminated overtime, banned working on holidays, and significantly raised the daily wage. However, they have not been able to join social insurance due to the number of employees. Other than that, the company has a much easier working environment now. "It's true that your salary has gone up, but that's not because of overtime or working on holidays. It's because your daily wage has gone up. So what's this overtime you've been talking about lately?" As I said that, my husband started looking around wildly. It's a telltale sign that he's lying or trying to think of a lie. "I don't remember ever calling you in for work on a day off." Jim pointed out something that my husband couldn't deny, and he was down for the count. Then, the bride and groom, who need to be waiting in front of the ceremony hall, came over. My daughter, the bride, was so angry that her face turned red. "So everything Dad was saying was a bunch of lies after all. My fiancé told me that his father wouldn't treat his employees like that." My daughter, of course, knew that her fiancé was the son of her father's company's president. That's why she found it strange that her father had gone out for urgent work when she was trying to introduce her fiancé. Being a son of the president, her fiancé knew how the business was being run. "Did you just want to avoid spending time with your family, so you used work as an excuse to go out?" "Of course, you did. You never helped our kids when they were asking for help with their study or job huntings, and you kept saying that you had to go to work." And now that we know that was a lie, I'm at a loss for words. After I said that, my husband was so stunned and he couldn't say a word. And when I checked the time, there wasn't much time left before my daughter and her fiancé's entrance. "We should get going now. Come on, you two are the main characters here, so hurry up and get ready," the president said to my daughter and his son, and he quickly headed towards the venue. I also advised my daughter and her fiancé that we couldn't cause inconvenience to the other guests, and pushed them to get going quickly. Then my daughter said, "What about you? Aren't you coming, Mom?" When I heard that, I lowered my eyebrows and said, "I'll be there as soon as I finish talking to your dad. I might not make it in time for the veil down, so I'll ask your aunt." But when I said that, my daughter yelled, "No." Originally, I, as the mother, was supposed to do the veil down, and my husband, as the father, was supposed to walk down the aisle with our daughter. My daughter had been hoping that her father would come through until the very end. Finally realizing the severity of what he had done, my husband said, I'll be there right away too," and ran toward our daughter, but she slapped him hard. My husband, my daughter's fiancé, and I couldn't figure out what had just happened, and we just stood there with our mouths open. But without changing her angry expression, my daughter told her father, I hate you, Dad. Don't ever come again. I'll have Mom do everything for the veil down and the aisle walk. Mom, forget about Dad, let's go. And she forcibly dragged me towards the ceremony hall. For a moment, I didn't know what to do, but everything was my husband's own doing. He might be looking sad and heartbroken, but it's not my problem. In the end, my husband wasn't allowed into the ceremony hall, and the fact that the bride's father's seat was empty wasn't mentioned by anyone, and the ceremony came to a close. My husband and I were in a cold war after our daughter's wedding. However, through the lawyer we had been consulting with, I served my husband with divorce papers. I've been fed up with your emotional abuse for a long time. I was going to endure it because our children are still in school, but I can't do it anymore. I can't go on with someone who makes our precious daughter cry on her wedding day. As I said this, my husband, who would usually fly into a rage, couldn't respond strongly and wore an indescribable expression. A few days after he asked for some time to think, he contacted his parents and my parents for some reason, and he brought them to our house. I declare here that I will be reborn. I want to get approval from my parents and my parents-in-law. He said something like that. My parents, who were caught up in this incomprehensible situation, stared at my husband in astonishment. However, my in-laws, who considered my husband a disgrace because of the wedding incident, were furious, and my mother-in-law slapped my husband many times more than my daughter had done. This stupid son of ours! We're not on your side. Pay the compensation and child support and set Emma free immediately. You took a daughter from them and married her, and you guys even had a daughter of your own, this stupid son. She seemed so furious that I had to calm her down. Connie, please calm down. The one to blame is my husband, not you guys. I'm okay. Just like you defended me at the ceremony, the responsibility lies solely with Benjamin. As I soothed them in this way, my in-laws apologized to my parents and me. No one is on my husband's side anymore. His own parents, his blood-related children, and even his co-workers have abandoned him. I didn't mean to. He muttered, and he said nothing more afterwards. In fact, my husband was told by the president the day after the wedding, "You're fired." Jim seemed to be pretty upset about his own son being neglected and being used himself. Naturally, this news spread throughout the entire industry. Since information circulates quickly in the local construction industry, my husband was subjected to criticism from various people. As a result, he was fired, I filed for divorce, and he resigned in despair. After the divorce, he paid alimony and child support, which left his savings completely depleted. He tried to find another job, but due to the rumors, he couldn't find decent employment and ultimately ended up as a freelancer. It's all just the result of his own past actions, so I don't particularly feel sorry for him. My current job is on track, and I bring home more than $3,000 a month. I receive sufficient alimony and child support, so I'm living comfortably not only financially, but also physically and mentally. My daughter gave birth 2 years after getting married, and my eldest son graduated from university, and my second son has just started living alone after successfully entering university. I'm planning a solo trip to Australia, which I've always dreamed as a way to take a break. The husband I chose was the worst, but my in-laws and the people around them are good people, so I feel like I've been saved.